Every day, millions of people consume plant-based protein, just like the foods right here, thinking it's the healthier option. But what if I told you this choice might silently be sabotaging your energy levels, your overall health, and even making you fatter? So, have you ever wondered if it really makes a difference where you get your protein from? Plant, powder, animal? It's all the same, isn't it? No, it's not. And the reason you potentially are overweight, have low energy, and really just don't feel great a lot of the time is because of where your protein comes from. But don't worry, in this video we are solving it all, my friend, because in this video we're going to be smashing why I avoid plant protein and what the hidden dangers of it are, what happens if you over-rely on plant protein, how it really makes you fat, how it causes fatigue, and number 3, why I will never eat plant protein again, and probably why you shouldn't either. And of course, what you should actually be eating and should be doing instead. You see, plant proteins are not as innocent as they may seem. Those naughty little shits. But before we expose them for the heathens that they are, and not to mention the scams we're being sold to by these big companies, you may be wondering what exactly is plant protein, and more specifically, what is considered a plant protein in the first place. So, put simply, plant proteins are the good stuff in plants that help our bodies grow and stay strong, right? They come from foods like beans, nuts, and lentils. So basically just think of them like the building blocks in the plants that help us build muscle, stay healthy, and have energy. And here's some other examples of plant protein if you want to see it. So now that you know what plant proteins are, let's expose the hidden dangers of plant proteins and the dangers of over-relying on plants in your diet. So yes, that means plant-based diets are pretty much whack. I'm gonna get real with you here. Too much plant protein in my diet has actually cost me millions of dollars. And yes, I know that sounds a bit whack, sounds a bit hyped, sounds a bit overstated, but it's totally true. You see, plant protein cost me millions of dollars in opportunity cost. Money that I would have and should have and could have made. This happened because I didn't understand what I'm about to talk with you right now about. As you know, protein, it's pretty important to say the least, right? Yet, 40% of Americans are not hitting their requirements on a daily basis. That may sound a bit hard to believe, but that's maybe why you don't feel your best, you don't feel like you have tons of energy all the time, and we're going to fix that here today. But the question you may be having is, 40% is a lot. Why are people not hitting their protein requirements? Why are they not feeling great every day? Because I feel fucking great every day because I changed this. It all comes down to one single fact. Protein is not protein. Not all protein is created equal. For example, 50 grams of protein from one food could build less muscle than 50 grams of protein from another food. So how is this true? How is 50 grams of protein not 50 grams of protein? How does one source of protein build more muscle than the other source of protein when it's both stated the same? It all comes down to one thing, something called dias. And no, we're not murdering and killing asses out here. That's for the weekends, right? It's spelled D-I-A-A-S. And so simply put, it is a scoring system for food that determines the quality of the protein in the food itself, along with the level of amino acids and how well we absorb the protein. As this really is where amino acids come into play, which we're going to discuss later in this video, but as you see, it all comes down to the diet score and what the makeup of the amino acid is in the food that you're eating. Those with higher diet scores have higher levels and more consistent levels of amino acids, which really, long story short, allows us to absorb the protein and actually use it. So basically, there's some foods that we can absorb more protein and use it than others. But we're going to dive into this a little bit later, but I want to illustrate this to you so you can see this, for example. As you can see that this plant-based meal has 54 grams of protein and 815 calories, while the animal-based has the same 54 grams of protein, but only 570 calories. You may be unsure of why this is, but the reason comes down to dias, which on a deeper level means the amino acid makeup is better, higher, and more consistent, as you can see. So, as you can see, if you ate the same amount of calories as the animal-based meal, 570, you would be deficient in protein and start feeling fatigued and experiencing other health issues. So, What's the solution here? Well, just eat more of the recommended amount to get to that protein level. But the issue with that is it leads us to point number 2. What happens if I over-rely on plant protein? Well, I think it's best to just show you. As you can see right here, we've got the cheetah. He's looking lean and mean, and he's a carnivore. And then we got the poor, big ol' elephant. He just eats plants. Then we've got the tiger and the pig. We've got the lion and the hippo. Carnivores, plant eaters. You know how I mentioned that plant protein has cost me millions of dollars? Well, let me explain exactly how that happened. You see, for months I was feeling tired, sleeping all the time, not really able to focus, and I was confused because, it was kind of dumb. Like, I meticulously researched and planned out my diet, tracked my macros, planned out my calories, ate the same food every single day, was working out enough, but yet I felt like chronically tired. Overall, I just didn't feel good at all. I was sleeping like 12 hours a day sometimes. And the thing is, those resulted in 2 things. And I didn't find a solution to those until I found something else out. But for one, I was getting fatter, honestly. And the simple reason was because I was getting extra hungry. Because I wasn't feeling full. Which was caused because my body was not absorbing all the proteins that I was eating. It wasn't using them, right? Because of all those dreaded plant-based protein sources, right? But more on this a little bit later. And second, I was literally always tired. It was so terrible. It was so weird. I was sleeping like 12 or 14 hours a day sometimes, trying to just get some work done when I woke up, and then feeling tired again just after a few hours. I was like, dude, am I dying? What the hell's going on? And this repeated consistently, wavering in the extremity of it for weeks in what seemed like months. But you're thinking, what was the real cause of this? You see, if you're like me and most everyone else, I assumed that all protein was created equally and absorbed equally, which actually led me unintentionally being deficient in protein itself, which you may be feeling that right now, which really led to me feeling fatigued, low energy, and a myriad of other health issues themselves. But the shitty thing was, and really the biggest issue was, most would never have even thought about having low protein itself. Because I was eating like 500 grams of quinoa each day, which is a freaking lot, weighed out, and 8 ounces of chicken, along with other things. I was eating enough food, like 2,500 calories, easy. And so herein lies the issue and the trick. But before we jump into that, let's take a step back here. Let me show you an example of this, and more specifically, the concept about total protein versus protein actually absorbed and utilized. You see, you need about 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. So, if you weigh 100 pounds, you need 70 grams of protein at least per day. If you got that from animal products, as you can see here, like steak, for example, you would see you have reached your protein goals as it has over 100 DIAS score. You're absorbing the protein and you're utilizing it. But here's the issue and the trick that you may not be aware of. If you choose to eat, for example, lentils, which has a DIAS score of about 74, with the goal of getting and absorbing 70 grams of protein, you wouldn't get there. You'd only get about half of that protein, even though you thought you were getting the full 70, and that was my issue. So literally for months, I was eating 70 to 80 grams of protein actually absorbing, where, I weigh about 180 pounds, so I needed at least 130 grams of protein per day, and I was getting 70 or 80. And really the only way in this scenario to be able to hit your 70 grams of protein would mean to eat more food, eat more lentils, which is more calories. And then you wonder why you or other people get fat. You're eating more calories to get less protein. It's illogical. Number 3. Why I will never eat plant protein again. Sounds drastic, sounds big, but the funny thing is, I take care of myself and I'm very specific with my diet. You may or may not be, but it's still applicable to you. I would spend hours meticulously researching and building my diets for one goal: to feel good, look good, and perform great for my businesses. And that may be the same thing for you. And naturally, we all want to feel this way. We all want to feel great. But the funny thing enough is, I built a diet that did the exact opposite of this without even knowing. I thought it was perfect. And it just wasn't until later that I found out the reality of how bad it truly was. To better explain this, you need to understand amino acids. You see, amino acids are like tiny building blocks that our bodies use to make proteins. Think of them like little Lego pieces that you fit together to build something like muscle, skin, or hair, right? Our bodies need the amino acids from the foods that we eat to grow and stay healthy. Some of these building blocks can be made by our bodies, but others we need to be able to get from the foods that we eat, right? But here's the rub. There are 9 amino acids that our body needs, and these guys are what determine what a quality protein is. This comes back to the DIAS score of the foods, which is basically what tells us how great our body is at absorbing the proteins and really that specific protein itself. And really, the level of amino acids the food has in itself. A high DIAS score means we're able to absorb the proteins well, and the food itself has a high level of amino acids. So let's just take this example and make it clear real quick. Let's say you're gonna have a meal, right? What we're going to do is we're first going to start with a peanut butter sandwich. And here you can be able to see the level of amino acids this food has. And you can see it actually has a poor source of lysine, which is an amino acid crucial in building muscle. So what are we going to do? We're going to add some lentils to that baby to spice it up, to boost that lysine up. But as you can see now, we have another issue. We are now low on I'm not going to even try to pronounce that because I'm not a scientist. Methionine, the one that's low, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to add some edamame to that bitch, and which really ends up being one of the highest sources of methionine, right? Which is great. So what is the issue here, and what does it have to do with protein and feeling good? Well, we only absorb the amount of protein from foods up to the lowest of the amino acids. So even though we have lots of phenylalanine, not going to even try, it doesn't matter. Our methylene or whatever is the lowest and still low, so all the protein is going to absorb, our body's going to absorb to that level of the lowest. So to make this even clear, let's compare this, the protein, or the plant that we just ate, to just 3 eggs and 4.5 ounces of steak. You can see we have plenty of amino acids, levels are very high, consistent, and not have any large outliers. Because once again, if there was a large, low outlier, all the stuff above it on the other amino acids would not even matter. We would not absorb that equivalent protein. So this means we're able to absorb a lot more actual protein compared to the plant-based diet. With the plant-based diet, in order to get the necessary protein like we talked about earlier, we're going to need to eat 245 more calories than the animal-based, which is where the fat comes in, right? You got to eat more calories, you're going to get fatter. But let's say you don't choose to eat extra calories. And the protein, eat the extra calories, and then therefore the protein that you need to meet the necessary protein requirements so you don't feel terrible and low energy and fatigued. This here is where the deficiency of protein comes in, and like I said, the fatigue shows up. But, okay, Rhett, cool, man. So I understand that plant protein foods have a lower DIAS score, which means they have lower levels of amino acids, and we only are able to absorb the amount of protein from that food to the lowest of the levels of the amino acids, which really results in us having to eat more calories to obtain the required protein compared to in an animal-based diet. Your question might be, what exactly should I be eating, right? What should I be doing instead of eating plant-based protein food sources? Well, that's a good question. Let me lay this out very simply for you. I'm going to throw this up on the screen. Plant gang here, the highest of the plants. We got soy and pea protein, but don't be eating the soy if you're a male, right? You're going to turn into a female, your estrogen is going to go through the roof, you're going to be a freaking soy boy. And if you don't want to be a soy boy, make sure to click the link in the description for how I look like this, how I look like a man instead of a female, how I got this jawline and how I got all of my shit going on. I want you to look like a female. I don't want you to look like a woman. So click that video and make sure you're doing things right. And what I ate a ton of was quinoa. Quinoa sucks. Even though it's a superfood, it's one of the worst plant DIAS foods, which was the source of my entire issue. So, that's the bottom line here. The bottom line here is the more protein you get from animal meat, the more muscle you will have. The higher energy you will have, the better you will feel, and the leaner you will be. As studies have shown that women who eat more meat have more muscle than the ones that don't eat meat. So, if you're like me and you want to feel good, have muscle, have energy, not be fat, that eat meat, right? Okay, so you know that plant protein is kind of deceiving, but what exactly do you do with all this information, right? You see, pretty much everything I've told you, while it's helpful, is pretty much useless. And because this knowledge alone is not going to help, there's still an issue of what you actually eat on a daily basis and how you map that out. And to be able to do all that, you want to click this video right here, and I'll show you exactly that.